Yesterday, OpenAI released a new video generation, not model kind of, but like actually capability within their what is it, 4.0 model. And so I felt like it's really interesting to maybe give it a try, particularly because we have much better like typography handling. And then also generally like the quality of the image is much better. So we won't go into detail of like just normal like image generation, but I'm more curious to see kind of like for brands and marketers, where are we, kind of like what works and what not. And so I did a few experiments that I wanted to share with you. Starting off, I took the example of Bosch and their famous Like a Bosch campaign. And so I wanted to just start simple by saying like generate an ad for a Bosch drill for LinkedIn, including the more you Bosch, the more you feel like a Bosch claim on top of it. So first it said like, okay, I think it meant I want to create just the text of the post. So after that, I said like generate the visual. So, and here was the kind of the first visually generated. So what we can see here is, I think interestingly, the spacing on certain things are not that bad. I think the spacing here is off. Obviously, we see that it uses a Bosch logo. It's not the most recent one, which is flat. The font itself, it seems to be quite aligned with also the logo font. What you can see here is that there is still some spacing, letter spacing, kerning issues on the typo. The image itself, I didn't give it a lot of instructions, so it's probably fine. We still have these issues on the product itself. So I feel like when it's about products, I wonder whether we're gonna go more into like a more hybrid approach where if 3D data and actual product imagery is available, obviously I could tune that and submit it to make it a better product image. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting first step where there's kind of like layout stuff included also. So I went a bit further and took like an actual campaign image from Bosch. So this one, the more you Bosch, the more you feel like a Bosch with banderas and this guy. And I wanted to say like, create versions of this ad, keep the text, replace the background image. As you can see, what happens here is that you get very different results if you continue in the same conversations, right? So for example, in this case, this is still my main reference point, and it doesn't reference the image that I submitted, but actually this one up there. So we got another version of this. So I show you in a second how this works, like when it actually takes this one. But then I was curious to see what happens if I give it another like latest logo. Can it work with that? So when you give it just a URL, it doesn't work. It just gives you back the link again. But then you can upload the logo and say use this logo, and then you can see now it switched to actually take this image as a baseline and then started to actually incorporate the SVG logo that I submitted, which is kind of nice. It's very accurate. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of pretty accurate. We still have those issues with the positioning of the letters, but that's already pretty decent. So what happens if I add a font, if I want to add like an actual, my own font or something like that? This, it seems like it ignored it. Maybe I didn't give it enough instructions, and it came up with a completely different version, which is kind of funny. But you can see how the character consistency and the pose and stuff stays roughly in the same realm also when you compare to the original one. So this one, we keep kind of the similar vibe. So that can be quite interesting. So let's go further and go into more variation. So in this case, I asked it, just replace the image in the background and keep the text the same. So it came up with this by the way, extremely high quality image, which is kind of like, just shows the same folks in a different environment, obviously without like other Bosch products in the background and stuff. So I didn't add enough like context to the prompt, so it's not surprising that it just came up with something. So then I went and said like create a version for LinkedIn. Funny enough, it seems like it's a LinkedIn post when you do like this side-by-side thingy and put a bit of a fake LinkedIn logo on top of it. Obviously that's not what we want, but still interesting what it does. Then I said create a TikTok version, so it kind of like made a vertical version. What is interesting here is that it seems to be able to kind of adapt to another format, while in this case the feel word lost an E for some reason. I don't know why. But interesting that it can handle that properly. So if you go further and say like, hey, I have this image now, let me create the TikTok version of this, which I expected to just have like the different format. But funny enough, what it did is it came up with a storyboard, more or less, of a video, because it assumes that if you want to post on TikTok, you want to post the video for sure. And so he came up with this quite interesting storyboard. Then when you actually want to make a video out of this, you could say generate the video mockup, but then it starts only with the first image. So in this case, you would need to go into Sora, most likely kind of generate the stills for each part, and then you actually go from there and generate the videos. But yeah, that's kind of cool as well. And then another experiment that I did was, what about like changing, giving it more input? So we have the same kind of original image, and then I give it a specific font file, and I give it a logo, and then I say create a variation in a Wild West theme. And so what it did is this. So what you can see in this one is that it ignored the font. It's kind of like over indexed on the Wild West theme, which is fine in this case. It took the logo, it for some reason took only the symbol, because that seems, it detected that this might fit that theme better. But yeah, anyway, it looks a bit skewed. I'm not sure if it is skewed, maybe it's fine. But yeah, you can see that how the image style is adapted to this different vibe, which is kind of fun. Well, probably wouldn't fit the campaign, so don't want to offend anyone at Bosch for that. But it's kind of interesting on what it does. So then I said like use the Bosch font instead. What it does then is going back to this, Bosch-like font, which it derived probably from the logo somehow. It's kind of interesting how it does it, because if you look at some example of the text rendering, it's not like that they would add an additional layer on top of the image or something like that, but it's actually still really the pixels that are predicted, which gives you some glitches in the font sometimes, but it's actually really, really good already. And probably for a not educated eye, this would look pretty proper. Then I said like create a variation on a soccer pitch. Now it's kind of like mixes up things. So in general, the advice is to always start a new conversation, because the context that you have on top here is kind of confusing everything. But what you can see here, then yeah, it for some reason switched to a square format. It cut off the text again, just with not enough instructions and context. So it's kind of okay. There's a little bit of that part would need to be replaced with a proper product rendering. But yeah, it's interesting to see where we are. But then I went further and detected something interesting, which is when you do create a variation in a Star Wars theme, you can see that what it does, and you cannot see it now because this happened before. But when you actually ask for that, it starts to generate an image which is actually matching a Star Wars theme. You have a lightsaber and stuff like that. But then along the way, when it's kind of like in the middle, it stops and it breaks and it tells you, hey, I couldn't generate this image because it involves copyrighted characters and settings which I can't replicate directly. So this to me seems super new. And so what it offers you is then you can create something like Star Wars, which works. But what happens if we go further and say create a variation in an Avengers theme? So equally funny enough, here as well, Avengers themes, copyrighted, visuals from Marvel. So it seems to me as this is a try from OpenAI to actually be more legally approved, especially larger companies, to generate images that are safe to be used. I think it's a step in the right direction, if you ask me, but I wonder how that ends up being, because if Disney is able to block these things, then why not everyone else too? So yeah, what happens if you go into another universe? So by the way, I then did this one here with just do something like Marvel Avengers. So in this case, a superheroes theme, so which you can still see has references to Iron Man here, or you know, there's some kind of similarities, but yeah, you get the point. And then I tried it with Simpsons because it's obviously not in the Disney universe. So, but funny enough, same thing. It started to generate the image in a Simpsons theme, but then stopped. So it seems like we have like parallel action going on here. So partly it generates the image, and when the image is probably, you know, generated enough, it goes through another system which checks whether it's close enough or not to the actual copyrighted material, which is an interesting thing which we have to look what's the direction of this. And then in this case I said like, okay, go ahead and take this kind of exaggerated look, yellow skin characters, over the top expression, la 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 la. And again, it generated the image kind of fully and then broke and again said, hey, that's the Simpsons style and it's too close. This to me seems like a pretty dramatic shift in the way we, or OpenAI in this case, handles copyright. I wonder whether this is triggered by some copyright claims or whether this is a general system that allows them to just, you know, everything that has a certain distinguished style kind of copyright it. But I think it's the right direction that they're taking here. And what I find pretty interesting is the font handling. It works really well, how it can handle like additional material to be incorporated into these. Yeah, and definitely an interesting space to watch, and also like whether we're gonna see like ads and certain material produced very, you know, production-like with the right input images and stuff. I think it's interesting to see, you know, is this a threat to stuff like Canva on like, you know, do you, if I don't have to kind of do the extra step of thinking by myself how I create this, will this be good enough? It's interesting to see how this develops over time, and then what are companies doing in brands? You know, is it like, do we have a more hybrid approach of having maybe a set of best practices and image libraries with approved material, and then you have guidelines, and then you merge it together into something? So we will definitely continue experimenting with this at Frontify, but I think it's interesting where this is going, just from this very, you know, short test that I did here. But yeah, what do you think about these? You know, where are we heading? And I will continue to keep you posted about the developments and then how all of this comes to life. See you next time.